only thing we have to fear is
in war,
fear itself.
there is no substitute for victory.
Let us never negotiate out of fear.
We stand undivided, forever united, fighting hand in hand for the liberty we've earned, for glory and honor, for our sons and daughters, ever mindful of the lessons we've learned. Let the torch of freedom burn.
Welcome to the intersection of faith and politics. WallBuilders Live with David Barton and Rick Green. Thank you for joining us today. We got a special treat for you today. Tim Brooks. We always love having Tim Brooks on the program, but we're going to actually bring you one of his live presentations from the Pro-Family Legislators Conference just a few months back. Tim Brooks right now at the Pro-Family Legislators Conference here on WallBuilders Live.
The preacher's little 5-year-old girl always noticed that her father always paused and bowed his head for a moment before starting his sermon. One day she asked him why he always did that. The preacher said, "Well, honey, Dad is asking the Lord to help him preach a good sermon." The little girl thought for a minute and said, "Why doesn't God ever answer?" I've been praying and praying today, so boy, I'm sure hoping he answers or we're in trouble. A veteran congressman was asked what he had learned about the political arena, and he said, "Well, I found it wasn't so much whether you won or lost, it's just how you placed the blame." I thought I'd pass that right on to some of you freshmen. I wonder about a lot of things. Things strike me, and I ponder those. And Terry and I were recently flying, and we were up in the air, I guess 500-600 miles an hour, 30,000 feet above the ground. And the pilot came on and says, "You are now free to roam about the cabin." Later on, we got down to the ground. We're taxiing 1 mile an hour. The pilot comes on and says, "Please remain seated with seatbelt securely fastened for your safety." I hadn't put all that together. I still hadn't put all together. When I walk into the airport, I see terminal everywhere I look. It just makes me look forward to get on the plane. You wonder about things, and you can't help but wonder. And I always wonder, why do you don't ever see headlines that said psychic wins the lottery? You wonder, why don't you ever see that? Why don't you ever, why do doctors call what they do practice? Does that make you concerned when you go to see your doctor? I've thought about this for years. What did cured ham have? Why don't sheep shrink in the rain? Why do you click on start to stop Windows? I see this in my own home. On the bottle, and I've got them in our house, on lemon juice that we drink, it says made with artificial flavor. And on the dishwashing liquid that we wash our dishes with, it says made with real lemons. I wonder about those kind of things. I always wonder when you're filling out all those forms. You know, you fill out forms and forms and forms. And they always, why do all applications say, who do you want us to notify or who do you want us to call in case of emergency? I always write down a doctor. In case of emergency, call 911. Call my brother. He's off up 7 states away from here. I'm going to call the doctor. Did you hear about the guy that hijacked a bus full of Japanese tourists? The police had 5,000 pictures of the guy. The boy on the corner was selling newspapers, and he was saying, "Extra, extra, read all about it. 2 men swindled." A man walked up, bought a paper, and sat down to read it. He said, "Hey, kid, this is yesterday's paper, and it doesn't say nothing about 2 men being swindled." The little boy yelled, "Extra, extra, 3 men swindled. Read all about it." A young couple was invited the preacher after Sunday sermon to come home for lunch. And So the couple was back in the dining room getting lunch ready. The preacher was left in the living room with the little boy, and so the preacher said, well, I try to start a little conversation with this little boy. So he said, well, son, what do you think we're having for lunch today? The little boy said, goat. The preacher said, goat? We're having goat for lunch? The little boy said, yep. I heard him say this morning, we might as well have the old goat for lunch today. You got to be careful as you get older. You don't hear things just exactly like you should. You need to be careful about that. An 82-year-old man went to the doctor. A few days later, the doctor saw him walking down the street with a gorgeous young woman on his arm. The doctor said, hey, I see you're really doing good. Man said, I'm just doing what you said. Get a hot mama and be cheerful. The doctor said, no, I said, you got a heart murmur. Be careful. I've appreciated being here the last few days. It's wonderful being around a group of believers. I'm worried about atheists. There's a lot of problems they face. I mean, what comforting words do you say at their funeral? A sign on the atheist tombstone, here lies an atheist, all dressed up, no good place to go. There's just a lot of things that atheists have to deal with that we just don't think about. I thought about becoming an atheist, and I started thinking about it. You know, they don't have any holidays. Our modern technological world that we're in, they have now all sorts of services, and they have just now, maybe some of you have seen this, a dial a prayer for atheists, where atheists can dial this number. It's a dial a prayer for atheists, and they dial this number, and nobody answers. What a great last 2 days. Talking to a couple of legislators, we were on the elevator together today, and you know, obviously the concern in all of our minds is, how do we remember all this? How do we remember? You know, I just can't retain all this. But you got to always know that the Holy Spirit's ministry is to call those things back to our remembrance. And that's what I'm believing that will happen for us, as we have fed ourselves and fed ourselves and fed ourselves, and maybe at this point don't even know what we've put in. And I heard an older man say years ago, when asked, what did the preacher preach last Sunday? I don't know. What did he preach 2 weeks ago? Well, I can't remember. What did the preacher preach 3 or 4 weeks ago? Well, I can't remember. Well, why do you go to church? You can't even remember the sermon from last Sunday. Why do you go? And the reply was this. Been married 50-something years, and tell you the truth, I can't remember what my wife cooked a week ago. I can't remember what she cooked 2 weeks ago. I can't remember what she cooked 3 weeks ago. But the nutritious meals that I've eaten over the last 50 years have kept me well, healthy, and strong. And you got to know, when you're feeding yourself on the right kind of thoughts, the right kind of input, whether you can immediately call it up or not, it's having a long-term positive effect in our lives. And you got to know that. You got to know that. The biggest lie in this century, and America has bought, is the separation of religious and secular. As we talked about last night, that there is no separation of a person's belief system and a person. It's like separating wet from water. It's not going to happen. Who a person is and what they believe, their worldview is how they perceive life, and that's inseparable from anybody and from everybody. And to tell our public school children they cannot sing Away in a Manger and Silent Night, but to tell them they can sing Here Comes Santa Claus and Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, you have not separated religion from secular institutions. You have merely exchanged one worldview, one ideology, one thought about what Christmas is about for another thought pertaining to what Christmas is about. And we cannot continue to buy into this idea. Well, that is religious. Let's put that Sunday morning. And we as legislators here in this room tonight cannot continue to buy in to that ideology, because it simply is not true.
I'm Professor Radisson. This is Philosophy 150. Fill in the papers I've just given you with 3 little words. God is dead.
When your faith is tested, would you fight for what you believe?
I actually believe in God.
To me, he's not dead. He's alive.
God's not dead, he's surely alive.
God's Not Dead, the movie. Join the movement at the box office and say, God's not dead. He's surely alive. Now playing. Rated PG. For more information, go to godsnotdeadthemovie.com.
Let the torch of freedom
We have not separated religious and secular activities in any shape, form, or fashion. We're simply taking out one worldview and allowing another, and we're coming to the place where we've had enough of that. We've had enough of that. And we're going to take a stand and say, I've had enough of that, and not hide in shame and not be embarrassed and not I don't want to be in that category. I don't want to be in that. I want to be in that category, and I've had enough of the others. And we've got to step up to the plate with it. Don't be confused. Don't buy into that issue that religion belongs in churches on Sunday morning. Our ideology is in every hour of every day, everywhere we are. And it shapes the way we think, the way we respond, and the way we live our life. And one produces a civilized man and another produces a barbaric man. And you cannot be ashamed of standing on the side that produces a civilized man. That can no longer shame you or embarrass you or make you think that you are a second-rate citizen. I'm tired of being talked down to and condescended like I'm one of the stupid ones because of what I believe, and I need to become more intellectual and get on a higher plane of understanding. Those days are over for me. I'm not bowing down and intimidated by that any longer. There's a passage that I want to begin with tonight that I think is very, very important for you as legislators to get a hold of. And it's a passage in Jude 10. And I would love for you just to jot that down or remember that verse. I want you to go back and read that several times in the next coming weeks, because it is very, very key to what I want to talk about, and it's key to understanding where America is. In Jude 10, it says, they do whatever their instincts tell them, and so bring about their own destruction. And that's where America is. That is where America is in our ideology right now. And that is where we are in our decisions right now. America's thinking whatever our natural instincts tell us to do now has become right and has become okay. And Jude is very clear. It says, and it will lead to their destruction. And right there is the crossroads that America is facing. The religion that is now being taught in public education. The religion that is now being taught all the way from kindergarten, all the way through our colleges and through our universities across the land, is that each person decides right and wrong for themselves. Nobody has the right to put their morals or their moral values on somebody else. There is an inner drive that all man has, and that inner drive should be free to express itself. And Jude is very clear, very clear. They do whatever their instincts tell them. And in doing that, leads to their own destruction. Today, America is defining right behavior, acceptable behavior, an acceptable lifestyle based on natural instincts. That's what's defining what is acceptable behavior. And I hear it every day, and you do too. I was born this way. I was born this way. Do whatever your instincts tell you. Live according to the way that you were born. It's not my fault. It's not wrong. In fact, it's okay, and I demand that you accept it because I was born this way. Jude 10 says they do whatever their instincts tell them. As we study genetics, as we study inherited traits, in fact, we do see predisposed genetics to certain behavioral patterns. And this has stumped Christians for a while as we debate whether this is a genetic mandated behavior or if this is a choice of behavior. Is this a genetic mandated behavior or is this a choice of a lifestyle? And as genetics are now showing that there are predisposed genes that do determine certain bends and certain lifestyles, it leaves many Christians fumbling and stumbling as to how to answer, I was born this way. Clearly, studies show that alcoholism runs in families. Alcoholism runs in families. Addictive behavior syndrome runs in families. Clearly, studies show that hot tempers, fits of rage can be inherited traits. One has fits of rage. One on the playground is calm. As you look at 2 and 3-year-olds, one has a very calm disposition. One has a very high fit of rage disposition that's clearly inherited genetic traits that you can begin to identify very early in life. 2, 3, 4-year-olds, you can begin to see certain bends that they have inherited for a different type of a lifestyle. When behavior is studied, clearly there are natural, born, genetic, inherited instincts. They're there. Well, how do we answer that? What is our response to that? When research now is telling us that even before birth, they can go in and test a fetus and now find some predisposed lifestyle patterns even before a child is born. You can make and see genetic patterns of behavior in a child. The one with a short fuse, the one with a hot temper, the one with rage, the alcoholic, the drug addict, the depressed, certainly did not choose to be like that. Observably, they were born this way. The homosexual did not choose to be like that. Clearly, they were born this way. For me personally, alcoholism has run rampant in our family for generations. I was told all my life from very early by my mom, who's here tonight, by different family members, you're just like your granddad. You're just like your granddad. He and I had the same characteristics, the same inner urge. My granddad was a chain smoker. My granddad died in his early 50s. Was a heavy drinker. Boy, you better watch out. You have that genetic. All of your uncles, all of those in your past, they're alcohol. And I've been told that. See, when America removes the Bible, then we've got to look somewhere else for our definitions. When we remove the Bible, then we are forced to look other places to define and determine what's right and what's wrong. And the only option that we are given without the Bible is that we were born this way, so it must be okay.
Red, White, Blue, and Green is a new reality show following the Green family around the nation, rediscovering the American principles that made us the most successful nation in the history of the world. You can be a part of launching this new reality series by visiting rickgreen.com and clicking on the Red, White, Blue, and Green tab. Here's a sneak peek from the pilot episode. Rick Green coming to you live from the Lone Star State of Texas, a beacon of hope and freedom to liberty lovers around the world. Today I'm thinking about why do we do what we do? Because everywhere we go as a family, when we're traveling and speaking, someone comes up to us and asks, where's the hope? Is it over for America? They genuinely feel like the stars and stripes are fading. I felt that. But when I look at my family, whether it's my son Trey and his drive to exceed expectations, or Reagan and his love for serving and teaching other people, Cameron and her determination to outperform her brothers in everything she does, or my little stagehound Rhett and his boundless enthusiasm. Through their eyes, I see a vibrant nation. When my children stand in the birthplace of the Constitution, or on battlefields where patriots gave their lives, I can see in them a rekindled flame of the American spirit. The future of my children's country is bright because it's built on the foundation of an incredible providential history. A history of patriots and pastors, entrepreneurs and freedom fighters, mothers, fathers, families like yours and mine, who chose to live like their nation depended on it. And it still does. So when people ask us, where is the hope? we tell them it's in you. Each of us, every individual, every family, has a duty to fight for freedom and add our voice, our color, to the American dream. For our family, it's red, white, and blue, and a little bit of green. To learn more about red, white, blue, and green, visit rickgreen.com.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
Now we're being told, as a society, we have got to accept the way people are born. They're born this way. Well, I was born with a compulsive disorder. You got to accept that about me. You got to accept that about me. See, God made me this way. Proverbs 14 warns us, and it says, there is a way that seems right, but the end is death. America is now failing to understand something that I want to talk briefly with us about tonight. America is failing to understand the sin nature of man. The born with sin nature. I don't know if they have never had any children of their own, or if they just have never been around any children, but children will teach you about the born sin nature. Children will teach you that. All you've got to do is be around my grandchildren for just 5 minutes, and you will find them expressing the sin nature that nobody in our family taught them to act like that. We got a den full of trucks. Why does the two boys want to play with the same truck? I've bought pads and notepads and writing pads by the stacks. I've got them everywhere. Why do they want to write on the wall? Nobody taught them to write on the wall. It's a born with sin nature. We're born selfish. We're born mean. We are born this way. We're born my bottle, my diaper, my colic, my toy. And as they mature, they understand the sin nature because it becomes more and more obvious. And that fit of rage that my 2-year-old can throw in the den, what does it look like when he's 22? What does that fit of rage look like when he's 27 and he just got fired and he goes out to his car and gets his gun and walks back into the place where he just got fired? What does that fit of rage look like? We've got to understand how man was, in fact, born. You're not born others-minded. Put one toy in between 2 18-month-olds and they will verify my sermon tonight. They're not taught to be selfish. They're not taught to hit. They're not taught to punch. No kid is taught to bite. Grab their brother's arm and jerk it and bite them on the arm. Nobody taught them that. See, Jude 10 says they do what their instincts tell them. The fact is tonight, I am born with a hot temper and a short fuse. But that gives me no right to bite David Barton on the arm. What he said to me a while ago was very hurtful, and he deserved to be bit. And I was just the one to do the biting. Tell me what's wrong with me biting him. That's where we are. That's where we are. I was born hungry. I was born hungry. They didn't give me the right to go over and grab Bob McEwen's meat off of his plate. Here, those potatoes are enough for you. I'm taking your meat. Why can't I do that? Who in here has the right to tell me that's wrong? I can choose right and wrong for myself. And I believe he's had enough to eat. I'm taking his plate. It won't work. And we're going to have to understand the sin nature of man. When the Bible, with its moral definition of sin and how to overcome sin, is removed from the thinking of society, we are in trouble because there is no justification for sin. Absolutely, you were born this way. I can see predisposed genetics. You have clearly inherited a compulsive trait. But the car that's meeting me on the highway does not allow me to be drunk and run into them head on because I was born this way to drink. Come on, we've got to understand this. A scripture that I want to talk about for a minute, and we're going to tie all this together, is Romans chapter 8, verse 12. We have no obligation to do what our sinful nature urges us to do. Tim, I was born this way. I understand you were born that way, but you have no obligation to live that way. Absolutely, you were born that way, but you have no obligation to live that way. Verse 13 goes on to say, for if you live by the dictates of the sinful nature, you will die. If you put to death the deeds of the sinful nature, you will live. Romans chapter 8, verse 13. For if you live by its dictates, for if you live by the sinful nature and what it dictates to you, you will die. Now here's what I want to say. Nowhere, no place in the Bible does it say accept who you are. Nowhere does the Bible say come out of the closet and announce who you are. In fact, it says to crucify who you are. In fact, you were born this way. I can see those predisposed genes. I can see that you have genetically inherited that as a behavior and as a lifestyle. But you've got to understand, you don't have an obligation to live that way. In fact is, you can crucify what the Bible calls sin. And this is the only way that America can continue to be America.
Well, we're out of time today, folks. That's Tim Brooks speaking at the Pro-Family Legislators Conference just a few months back. We'll have to get the conclusion tomorrow, so return right here on WallBuilders Live tomorrow. Tim Brooks will be with us. WallBuilders Live with David Barton and Rick Green.
We stand undivided.